What's up, everybody? Not that long ago, I put up a couple of videos looking at some audio problems that I ran into. Since then, I've dug a bit more into those problems, and I have some updates. So, first off, let's talk about the Zoom F6's line-out noise problem. To briefly summarize, if the line-out level on the Zoom F6 is set very low, so it produces a mic level output, there's a pronounced hiss in the output signal. Now, I've already covered my workaround in the previous video, which I'll put a card to, wherever the cards go. However, I was curious, is this really a problem with the F6, as in like a defect, or is this an artifact of the design? And digging through the specs and schematics, it looks to me like it's more of the latter than the former. So why do I say that? Simply put, it comes down to how the F6 sets the line out level. If you look at page 198 in the manual, you'll see that the output level is set digitally before the DAC and not by adjusting the amplification of the resulting analog signal. Basically, by doing the level adjustments digitally, the output DAC only ever uses its full range when there's no attenuation being used. As a result, as you lower the level setting, the DAC uses less and less of its output range. However, the noise floor stays the same. A zero value is always zero. So for example, suppose we have a digital sample with a value of 32,000 to be output. If the level adjustment is set to 0 dB, then the DAC gets the full value of 32,000 and produces a voltage proportional to that. Now suppose we want to lower the output level. The F6 divides the sample's digital value by the set level. So if the output level is set to, say, minus 20 dB, then the sample with a digital value of 32,000 would be divided by 10, and the DAC would see a value of 3,200. However, in either case, a digital value of 0 still produces a 0-volt analog signal, and consequently, the noise floor stays the same. Compare this system to a system that uses a variable attenuator or a variable gain in the output amplifier. In those systems, the DAC always sees and uses the full range of digital values. Consequently, with that kind of system, or this kind of system, the DAC retains most of its dynamic range, even though the output voltages would be adjusted to the desired levels set. So this is why the attenuator cable is probably the best quality solution. Is the best quality solution. With the F6 line out level at 0 dB, the output DACs use their full range, and the attenuator cable attenuates both the signal and the noise floor by the same amount. Therefore, the dynamic range largely stays the same, even though the voltages that you get at your input device will be adjusted. So, does the F6 have a problem? I think the answer to this kind of depends on whose perspective you're talking from. From Zoom's perspective, the F6 is probably performing precisely as designed, though maybe not as they intended. In other words, this is probably not a defect in the product as much as it is a less than stellar design. In looking at some discussions and doing my own testing, I see a noise floor around minus 41 dB when the line out is set to minus 48 dB. That's right around, or that gives right around that gives a result right around the expected 47 dB dynamic range that I would expect to see due to the digital attenuation. The extra 6 decibels is probably accounted for in the setting of the levels using this minus 6 dBFS tone. That said, as a user, I'd argue that the design is flawed. Sure, it works at line level, and one could argue that this is an audio recorder and so you shouldn't be using the line out for anything that important. However, I also shouldn't have to compromise on signal quality this much to get scratch audio at mic level to input into my cameras. Nor should I really need to use an attenuator cable to do the same thing. Also, having such a high noise floor, so if you aren't attenuating it somehow, or you're just using the -48 option in the Zoom F6, can impact waveform-based audio syncing in post-production. Put simply, a cleaner signal is always better. With that said, there was one question that came up in the comments of the previous video that I think warrants a bit added discussion. That question was, if you don't use the 50 dB pad, could you damage your camera's audio input since, it won't be getting a mic level signal? The answer to this, at least as far as I've been able to determine, is probably not. Unfortunately, it's also hard to say for certain, in no small part because none of the camera manufacturers provide real good specs for their camera's audio inputs or general audio capabilities as it stands. For example, in the manual for the EOS R5, Canon simply says, and I quote, "External microphone input terminal compatible with 3.5mm diameter stereo mini plug." Well, gee, thanks, Canon. Way to give me a ton of useful information there. In fact, even for things like the built-in attenuator, Canon never specifies the amount of attenuation anywhere in the camera manual. By the way, that's 20 dB. That said, I feed my cameras a signal well above mic level. With my F6, I set the line out to a level of -20.5 dB, and that's what goes to my cameras. On my 5D Mark IV, the recording level on the camera is set to its lowest setting and no attenuation is turned on, and the recording levels are right on the money. The R5 handles audio a little bit differently. In fact, it's very similar to how the EOS M3 handles audio. And so I do have the attenuator on, and the recording level is set to around 30% of the level scale. And again, the -6 dBFS test signal from the F6 is at -6 dBFS on the camera's meter. Put simply, even with such a hot signal, not that it's that hot, the camera levels are perfectly normal, it's not clipping, and I'm operating inside the range of settings provided by my camera manufacturer. And you know what? That's good enough for me to consider it to be safely within the designed limits. So with the F6 out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about the USB noise issue that I ran into with Rode's Wireless Go receivers. So again, to quickly recap, I found that when I plugged my Wireless Go receiver into some USB power sources, there was a high-pitch interference noise that showed up on the audio output. This, of course, made it impossible to record and power the Wireless Go receiver simultaneously. Since posting that video, I've done some more testing and have discovered the interference noise seems to be related to the USB data signals, or at least it seems to be a problem when the receiver is hooked up to a computer. So I tried a number of other USB power sources that ranged from standalone USB chargers to USB battery packs and to even different computer equipment. For the USB chargers, I tried Anker's 4-port power port and an iPhone charger, and they both worked fine without any audio interference. Likewise, I tried a couple of generic USB battery packs, and these didn't produce any audio or any interference either. I also tried plugging the receiver into the 5-volt USB power out on my small HD DP4, and even plugging the receiver into my iPad Pro, and again, no issues. So where do I see issues? Basically, with any USB port that's part of a computer. So plugging into any of the USB ports on my desktop computer resulted in noise. The same thing went for the USB ports on my monitors or any USB hubs that were attached to my computer. Likewise, plugging it into any of the USB ports on my MacBook Pro also caused the interference noise. So where does this leave us for externally powering the Wireless Go's while recording? Well, it looks like you can actually charge the recorders charge and record from the Wireless Go simultaneously, but you have to be careful about what you use to charge them. So my recommendation right now is this. If you think you might need to charge and record for whatever reason in the field, before you go out, first test the exact charger you want to use. Second, Avoid using a computer peripheral, or a laptop as your power source, as that seems to be the biggest cause of interference. And finally, I know it might be tempting to plug into your laptop while you're recording, especially if it's right there, but that does seem to be a recipe ripe for disaster. That said, I obviously don't have access to an endless supply of chargers, so if you've had success or problems charging a wireless Go while recording with it, please leave a comment below with your story and the charger you used so that we can get a better idea of what's going on. So that's the update on problematic audio stuff. If you found this useful, please consider smashing that like button and subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching and see you next time.